Next up is our man from Delhi, who's just arrived just in time, is Mr. Amitabh Kant. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Niti Aayog. As you know, he's also been behind Make in India, Startup India, Incredible India, and many, many other campaigns. He's also the author of Branding India, an Incredible Story. And he's been such a big fan and supporter of the startup movement in India, and he's visited the US many times. We've had several interactions with him. So please welcome Mr. Amitabh Kant.
So it's a question answer?
You can make some remarks.
Okay. I'm really delighted to be here. It's a great pleasure to be in Bangalore and in the midst of this wonderful young audience. It's always, being in Bangalore is very infectious because there's so much of energy and vibrancy, dynamism, and there's so much of adrenaline flowing here in Bangalore. So good to be back and in the midst of great young entrepreneurs. When we started this Startup India movement a couple of years back, many of our startups were actually going to Singapore and Silicon Valley. I think we've been able to create an exciting ecosystem when a lot of, firstly, I think we've been able to create a fund of funds which supports startups. We've, I think, been able to create a system where a lot of young startups are registering their patents. We provide a lot of support to them through lawyers. We give an 80% deduction of startups which are registering patents. So the Indian patent regime is particularly tilted towards startups. We do a 3-year tax exemption, which to my mind should not be done, but we push for it in the initial years. I'm not a great believer in tax exemptions, but for startups, we really went out of the way to say that 3 years of tax exemption in the first 7 years. But I think one of the key things we've tried to do, and I don't know whether it's really worked, but the key really is about government being the first buyer for startups because you're doing innovative things. And for innovative things, government needs to really stand out and be the first buyers. And that's what we said that, for startups, experience, when we say that 10 years or 15 years of experience, that should not be insisted upon as long as startups produce quality products. But I'm really delighted when people say that we've been able to produce the second best ecosystem in the world for startups. But I think that journey has just begun because India is really growing at 7.5%. Last quarter, we grew at about 8.2%. But the challenge really is to grow at rates of 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period, year after year, year after year. And this would require several things to be done. Firstly, over the years, we'd made India very, very complex, complicated, difficult, too much of paperwork. So one of the key things India has tried to do is to remove a lot of rules, regulation, procedures. We are the only country which has actually scrapped 1,200 laws. So our objective has been to make India easy and simple for startups. And in the process, one of the key things that we've tried to do is that do away with human intervention at every stage, allow digitization to take place everywhere, and so that there's only digital interaction, there's no human intervention. And that's one of the key reasons why India has jumped up 42 positions in the ease of doing business. We expect another major jump when the new rankings are announced in another week or 10 days by the World Bank. But a lot of you work in the States, and States, India is a very large country, it's bigger than 24 countries of Europe. Many of you work in the States, and therefore it's important that states become easy and simple. We've tried to create a sense of competition among states. so that states compete with each other on ease of doing business, particularly for startups. And we are doing a ranking of states on how good they are for startups. So that ranking will be announced shortly by DIPP. But we've tried to make India. So that's one bit of the story. The second is that important thing for all of us in the startup movement is that innovation will really be the key. And innovation not in terms of sheer e-commerce, but a lot of challenges relating to India. And my view is that Indians must find solutions to their problems. And many of this will relate to areas of health. They'll relate to education, health simply because our infant mortality, maternal mortality, our nutritional levels are very poor. And if we are able to find, or on education, or on nutrition, and my view always has been that if Indians are able to find solutions to the problems of India, then we are not finding solutions merely for the 1.3 billion people of India, but for the 7 billion people of the world who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the next decade. And that is really the key issue, because in our country, learning outcomes are extremely poor in education. We've been able to provide access of education, but learning outcomes are extremely poor. And I'm delighted that some young startups are doing amazing work. I mean, Aditi of Imbibe, for instance, she does this tracking of students on learning outcomes. It's much like you track on longitudinal, latitudinal basis. Uber, so you're tracking students on their learning outcomes. And that's a big step forward if we can crack it. And, several startups working in the field of education, Baiju, et cetera, have done remarkably well. Or look at health. I mean, look at health. Mitra Biotech, which was actually a company based in Silicon Valley, relocated itself into India, into Bangalore, doing great work on personalized cancer care. And so on, the examples are enormous. So I think the challenge really is to find solutions to the problems of India, of how are we able to provide better seeds and fertilizer to our farmers based on soil and weather conditions on a real-time basis, This is one of the biggest challenges. And I don't know how many of you are aware of the work which Sat Shore is doing. Sat Shore is doing some amazing work on providing assistance and support to farmers on soil and weather based on, all on a real-time basis. We are working with, actually we are doing some work with them, and we are working with, based on ISRO data on 10 of the backward districts. We don't call them backward, we call them aspirational districts, to enhance production and productivity in the agriculture sector. So I think the world is all open to us, and if we are able to crack problems of India, then the whole world is your market. The challenge really is that Indians constantly keep thinking of India as the market. And that's why our small industries remain small, our medium micro industries remain micro, and our small industries remain small. The challenge is to think big and think large and see how we can penetrate global markets. And one of the key things for our startups is that as you mature, how do you become an efficient company which can think of the global markets? Because if you look at companies across Japan, Korea, or China which matured, they never thought of the domestic market, but they used the domestic market as a springboard for the world on penetrating global markets. And therefore, it's very important. The Indian mindset really is about the world. You can't be a successful, great company which will mature from a startup to a great company without thinking about the globe and penetrating global markets. And it's very important to think in those lines. The other thing I want to say is that quite often, most often than not, India has always gotten to sunset industries. Always, India has got into sunset industries where the world market has already been captured. And whatever innovation you do, it's very difficult to catch up with the rest of the world. But today, India is poised at a point of time when the world is going to go through a very major disruption. And the world is going to go through a very major disruption. The world is going to move over from oils to renewables. And renewables, the challenge will be about storage and batteries. And particularly India, which is pushing the limits on renewable, and we've got very attractive bids. 175 gigawatt is our target. But we are failing on rooftop. And rooftop solar is failing simply because innovation has not happened on storage and batteries at the household level. And this is a huge, huge business opportunity, because if we can capture that market, the whole world is open to us. And therefore, my view is that India needs to put all its innovative spirit into product development on storage and batteries. That's number one. Number two is, whether we like it or not, we are in the midst of one of the biggest disruptions in the automobile world. And right now, the cost of a combustion car is still cheaper than an electric vehicle, and therefore electric vehicles occupy a very marginal share of the market, because the battery cost is about 275 kilowatt per hour. But in the next 4 to 5 years, all analysis show that the cost of battery would have fallen to about 75 kilowatt per hour. And this would lead to the cost of electric vehicles coming down very sharply, and the electric vehicles will become cheaper than combustion cars. And therefore, there's a whole world open on electric vehicles. Every single component of electric vehicles, and the number of electric vehicle manufacturers. Now, when I say electric vehicle, we must understand that in the Indian market, 76% of the vehicles are two-wheelers. 76% of the vehicles are two-wheelers, which consume almost about 45% of the oil, and which are responsible for about 32% of the CO2 emission in India. So therefore, every single part of a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, which Mahindra or Tata manufacture right now in India, every single part of the electric vehicle is right now imported. Every single bit is imported. And therefore, there's a huge opportunity, firstly, on doing a lot of product innovation around electric vehicles. And whether we like it or not, 4 years down the line, the combustion car market will be a dead market. The electric car market will be a flourishing market. And therefore, from software to product innovation to product development, the whole world is your market for that. And therefore, this is an area, and if 76% of the vehicles in India are two-wheelers, and another 7 to 8% are three-wheelers, then the challenge is how do we put batteries on our two-wheeler, and how do we ensure that these batteries do DC charging at home in the 2 to 3 hours in the night, and how do we retrofit all this vast legacy of two-wheelers here in India. And this is a large market, a massive market, which is waiting for a huge disruption. And my view is that in the next 3 to 4 years, India will see massive disruption of people moving from capex to opex. That is, the charging will be all on per kilometer charge. So everybody will be charging on operational kilometer. And therefore, what you see today, I mean, the emergence of Ola or Oyo, all these, or even Flipkart, these were all based on great innovation, but they kept up in terms of technology. And technology, these wouldn't have become great companies, all three of them. Ola getting into international market, Oyo now getting into China and UK and many other markets. Or Flipkart getting sold at $21 billion would not have been possible if they had not kept pace with innovation. And they kept pace with innovation simply because they became companies which utilized artificial intelligence. It would not have been possible for Ola to become such a great company without artificial intelligence. And that is going to be your future. And therefore, our view is very strongly that by 2030, the artificial intelligence will be driving growth and productivity across the world. Its output on account of artificial intelligence will be close to about 15.7 trillion, which is more than the output of China and India put together. That is the kind of productivity which artificial intelligence will drive. And another study by Accenture has shown that India will add about 957 billion on account of artificial intelligence by 2035. And therefore, India itself, its growth story, its ability to do a lot of unique work on account of artificial intelligence will drive India's production and productivity in the years to come. And therefore, if you want to be a great company, you have to innovate through artificial intelligence and blockchain. This is critical. This is critical, but this would require a completely new mindset, and this would require us to do several things. It would require us a huge amount of restructuring of our innovation system in terms of many more data scientists. We need to have many more algorithms, and we need to bring in great computing, supercomputing power into India. Much of that work is being done today by us in government by trying to create centers of excellence where startups, academia, research, many of them can work with centers of excellence on supercomputing power. But also the challenge is for many of you to be able to bring that excellence by using cutting-edge technology. It will not be possible for many of us, our startups, to penetrate global markets without cutting-edge technology. And therefore, it's important to make this point that it would require many of you to be able to solve India's problem. I mean, if artificial intelligence is necessary, to our mind, it's necessary to enhance productivity in agriculture. It's necessary to crack a whole range of challenges which India faces. But blockchain is necessary if we want to reduce our court cases, which are a huge number of court cases pending, or 70% of our cases are relating to land in our courts, and they all can be tackled by blockchain. So I think these are solutions, these are product innovations which the startup need to provide to India. And to my mind, the key challenge for us in government is that government must become the first buyer of many of your solutions. And this is what we've been pushing for, not merely in the government, but through many of our public sector undertaking. For instance, the oil companies have put aside a budget of about 500 crores where they will work with startups, and some of them are working. I know, for instance, Indian Oil is working with a startup on lithium batteries. Another one is working on graphite and air batteries. So many of our startups will be very happy to support through this movement of working with public sector. And one of the key things which we are trying to do is to ensure that public sector in India and the government departments in India become the first buyer of many of the product innovations that you do, so that we are able to provide an easy market for you, not based on your experience, but on the basis of quality of your products. So these are key challenges, but it's important that as we go along, startups, we are able to push the limits of startups, we are able to do unique product innovation, and we are able to find solutions to the problems of India, which would then enable us to penetrate reach out to the large number of people who will move to urban cities and become a part of the middle class in the coming years. And lastly, I think it's very important for all of us to focus on cutting-edge technologies, which will enable India to technologically leapfrog across to penetrate the world markets. With these few words, I'll conclude, and I will be very happy and very willing to respond to any query that any startup may have.
Good evening. My name is Sanjeev. I run a startup in healthcare tech for the last few years. Before that, I worked with Siemens and GE for 30 years in the medical systems. With due respect, and I think, Mr. Amitabh, you would not probably be expecting this to hear from me, but I've been coming to NASSCOM for the last 10, 15 years. But today, I came specially because I saw your name on the agenda. I must tell you, we are in the patient data storage and distribution. In the last few years, we are big in cloud, SaaS, and we have started doing some early work in AI. But sorry to say that this has happened despite government help. And while state governments have been, to a certain extent, either giving us level playing field or some advantage, some of the central government institutions have gone out of the way to, I won't use the word kill us or hurt us. I thought I should bring this up to you, and whenever you get an opportunity, if you give me a chance, I'll give you some real specific horror stories to share where central government has really put us down. Thank you.
So, I think it's important to understand that in government, everybody doesn't have the same mindset. For every 9 lousy officials that you'll meet, you have to be just persistent. At the end of the day, you'll find the 10th man who will be positive. And I mean, it's exactly like the private sector, that you'll come across 9 guys who may not be as dynamic as you are, but the 10th guy will be someone like you who's positive and dynamic and wants to make a huge amount of work. But I think important thing for startups is that today there are a number of channels open for startups, and I think you need to keep pushing the boundaries. We've created a startup hub in West India. The DIPP drives it, and let me assure you that I'm open 24/7 for any startup. And I only wish you had got across to me. If any central government undertaking or any department is out to kill you, please tell me. I will be there to solve your problem. I'm there to assist you. Please, at the end of this thing, you can take my mobile, you can take my email ID. I will act as your facilitator. I will act as your catalyst. But having said that, you know, and I'm open to any single startup who's here, and we in Niti Aayog will actually, in addition to Startup India, Startup Hub, if you feel, we'll create a team of 3 or 4 young people who'll handhold, assist, and support you in a science and technology web. But having said that, let me tell you this, that, you know, it's easy to blame the government, but my personal views are on the data side, on the digital side, the government has really pushed the limits on digitization. And you know, it's important to understand this because, you know, India is the only country in the world where 99.3% of the people pay income tax online. You know, unlike America, where all the data is owned by Google and Facebook, and unlike China, where it's owned by Tencent and Alibaba, India has been able to create this whole data set simply because the government has really pushed for digitization through the Jam Trinity. It's pushed for mobile. It's pushed the battle for biometric. It's really pushed it, despite a whole lot of activists working against it. We pushed the limits on biometric, and look at the whole GST. I mean, it's all a digital game. Making India a one-tax country is a major structural reform, all based on digitization. Or look at the new Ayushman Bharat scheme. 150,000 primary health centers will get linked up to the district hospital digitally, all digitally. So the poor person living in a tribal hamlet will be able to consult a doctor in a district hospital, all digitally. All prescriptions will be digital. And 500 million people, 500 million people, that is more than the population of USA, Europe, and Mexico put together, are being given a health insurance scheme up to 5 lakh rupees, which is cashless, portable, and paperless. It's all digital. Which country in the world has pushed for digitization? So don't blame the government for everything. The government has pushed for digitization in a manner which no country in the world has done. Now the challenge for us is, having done that, it's important that we should put out data in public domain, and we should enable our startups and our academia research to take advantage of that, and much of that work is being done. And surely we'll put it out so that many startups, we are working on a data portal which will enable good data to be put out so that all of you can innovate on that, and academia and research can do good work on that. So I think the government has done a lot. Some individual cases, yes, you'll have a problem. I have a problem. I have a number of problems on a vast range of issues every day. I fight that battle every day. But the government at a macro level is pushing to do away with human intervention and to ensure that digitization takes place across departments. Some of these problems you'll face at state level. Some of them you'll face at central level. I've faced these issues all my life. I've never got dispirited. Why should you get dispirited? Fight the battle and win it. Yeah. Never lose your heart. No. Yeah, so tell me what we can do, we'll do it for you. Yeah.
Let's take some more questions here. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Thank you for the spirited talk. Very glad to have you here. And I'm an entrepreneur from Delhi, and my family owns 2 gas stations, so I'm a bit worried these days. But anyway, I had a small question. If somebody wants to innovate in the field of batteries, like you said,
Yeah.
or autonomous vehicles or maybe electric vehicles. How can the government help in? Because the capex is very large. We need a very huge capex for anything to do with automobiles. How can we level the playing field? How can the government help us level the playing field with these big companies?
So there's several ways. One is that the government is on the verge of rolling out some grand challenges. Actually, the Atal Innovation Mission, and I forgot to talk about it because one of the biggest things the government is doing is actually to disrupt our education system. Because we are supporting about close to 3,000 schools. In the last 2 years, within Niti Aayog, we've supported 3,000 schools with robots, 3D printers, Internet of Things, and now artificial intelligence from class 6 onwards. So that students move away from the Anglo-Saxon system of education that we've had, and they become far more innovative. And we've supported schools in slum areas, we've supported public schools, we've supported incubation centers, about close to 25 incubation centers in IITs. And we recently had a contest between slum children, public school children, and IIT students. And actually the most innovative were the children from the slum areas, because they were able to find solutions to the problems. They could find solutions to water, which could be made fluoride and arsenic free, whereas the IIT students kept working on algorithms all the time. So my view is, my view is that, you need to unleash the innovative spirit of young Indians, and that is what we are trying to do. So on this, Atal Innovation Mission has rolled out a lot of grand challenges. 2 of them relate to this, where they will support you if you're a winner, and that support goes into crores. So please have a look at that. And I think you should work with Department of Science and Technology. You should work with BIRAC. Many of them are doing some very innovative work relating to these areas. And a large resource of our existing engineering and IITs now is being diverted in the direction of the Prime Minister. Prime Minister's view is that actually we should work on 2 areas, and these are areas where India must bring in the biggest disruption possible. That is on batteries and on storage.
Thank you, sir.
Question back there? Back there. Or we'll take this one first. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I want to share a positive story here about startups. We reached the central government when the PMMVY, the Pradhan Mantri Madhur Vandana Yojana, was announced. We were given the chance to do the DBT system, and in less than 8 months, we had disbursed around 1,500 crores for that system, a startup.
So congratulations.
So it's a motivation to many of you that it's not always difficult. We can get this going. Thank you.
No, it's very important. I mean, he's given you one example with a number of fintech. A huge amount of innovation has been done by fintech companies. I worked in the fisheries sector of Kerala some years back, and as Secretary Fisheries, one of my main challenge was to improve the lives of traditional fishermen. We were, it was a nightmare because we were able to provide houseboats, we were able to provide outboard motors, new fishing nets, traditional crafts, but opening their bank accounts, know your customers was a nightmare for traditional fishermen. I mean, today you can do it in 1 minute flat. I mean, technology has evolved so much simply because of handheld devices, and therefore tomorrow, day after, there will be, I've been saying this for a long time, that there will be no physical banks and there will be no physical bank managers. It'll all be digital, thanks to fintechs like him. All the data will be available, all on account of mobiles. And the speed at which smartphones are growing in the next 4 years, every single Indian, the cost has so radically fallen that every single Indian will have a smartphone 4 years down the line. And we'll probably be the first country in the world which will do away with debit card, credit card, ATMs. All transactions will be on mobile. So you'll have a humongous amount of data to play around. And financial inclusion will not be a function of some bank manager deciding whether this man should be giving credit or not. It'll be all on the basis of data analytics and deep learning, which young entrepreneurs like him will be doing. So what India has enabled in terms of an ecosystem, no other country in the world has been able to do. Let me tell you this.
One last question, please, back there.
Hello. Sir, my question is regarding medical devices. Yeah. So in India, most of the medical devices, not the consumables, the syringes or other things, but the capital equipment are all imported, even today. Yeah. So, and I have come across many entrepreneurs who have developed innovative equipments, but find it very expensive to get compliance testing, because compliance testing for each equipment is 20, 30 lakhs.
Yeah.
Can I ask one last question, please?
Thank you, Amitabh. Thank you so much.